Brothers and friends, good evening. My name is Brian Evans. I'm the chairman of the Rubicon Masonic Society, and I'm happy to be with you all tonight. We have a great education topic for us and greatly look forward to that. But before we begin, let's go ahead and get some business out of the way. This episode marks our 58th episode of Virtual Masonic Education discussions since we started this in 2020. The series is entitled 21st Century Conversations on Freemasonry. For those of you who are coming back to our education, we thank you. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we hope you enjoy this and we'll come back again in the future. And finally, to anyone watching this video online, a recorded version, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, the Rubicon Masonic Society, or joining live if you like. We're open to Masons of all degrees as well as non-Masons. You can RSVP at rubiconmasonica.com/RSVP. As always, a special shout out and thanks to our wonderful sponsors and friends and brothers at the Ware Lodge of Research and Lexington Lodge No. 1. Your support helps keep the machine running, and we thank you very, very much for your on and off the field support. Worship Brother Alan Martin, chaplain of the Rubicon Masonic Society, would you be so honored to deliver the opening devotion?
Grand Architect of the universe, we ask your blessing this evening as we gather once more to continue our exploration of Freemasonry. We pray for open minds so that we may be better enabled to receive, understand, and apply new knowledge in such a manner that leads us to become better men and Masons. These things we ask in your holy name. Amen.
So mote it be. Thank you, brother. Brothers and friends, our virtual Masonic education aims to help us to become better men, always devoted to our family, our faith, and our country. May we all come together to learn, to subdue our passions, to discipline our minds, and to improve ourselves through the tools of Freemasonry here tonight. Any opinions expressed during this education will be those of the presenter or participant. They do not necessarily reflect the views of any lodge or Grand Lodge or the Rubicon Masonic Society. You can find our full disclaimer at rubiconmasonicsociety.com/disclaimer. As you know, these are not tiled meetings. Masons and non-Masons are welcome to attend and participate. So please be mindful, brothers. Anything discussed should be suitable for Masons of all degrees as well as non-Masons. Of course, gentlemanly manners are to be expected at all times. No alcohol, no smoking, no eating, no foul language will be permitted. No discussion of politics or religion, of course. To best assure that these meetings are as enjoyable as possible for everyone, we do request each meeting's attire is coat and tie. Please type your name, any appropriate Masonic title or location under your video. If you're not a Mason, please simply type guest after your name. Enable your video camera as long as you're well presented so we can see you. We do want to see you. Please reduce background noise, turn off all computer programs, be patient should any technical difficulties occur, and of course, enjoy the education and participate as you feel fit. Worship Brother Dan Kimball, would you please do the honors tonight in lieu of our absent brother Bizak and deliver the introduction to our special guest?
Brothers, our presenter this evening is Right Worshipful Brother Chad Kopenski, who comes to us this evening from beautiful Athens County, Ohio. He's a past master of Paramuthia Lodge No. 25 in Athens, Ohio. Right Worshipful Brother Chad holds membership in Amesville Lodge No. 278 in Amesville, Ohio, Valley Lodge No. 145 in Malta, Ohio, and Oregon Lodge No. 151 in Oregon, Wisconsin. He's a past district deputy grandmaster and past district education officer for Ohio's Masonic District 17. He's a past chairman of the Grand Lodge of Ohio's Education Committee and is the immediate past president of the Midwest Conference on Masonic Education. Right Worshipful Brother Chad is one of the founding regents of Ohio's Royal Schofield Society. He's a frequent speaker in lodges and at Masonic symposia. Right Worshipful Brother Chad is a firm believer in Masonic education and in the intentional aspects of Freemasonry. He speaks to us this evening on the life and the work of Ohio artist, author, and Freemason John Sherer. Right Worshipful Brother Chad, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. You really make me sound much more impressive than I am, so I thank you for that. Um, but no, it's truly an honor to come to you all tonight and speak. I've long been a fan of the society and the work that you do, and been a frequent visitor. So again, thank you very much. If it's okay, I will go ahead and I will share my screen, and we'll start the festivities.
Go right ahead. You should have full control whenever you're ready.
I believe that I'm hopeful that you should all now be seeing a title card. Is that correct?
Correct.
Excellent. So again, today we'll be talking about the Masonic legacy of John Sherer. A good standard disclaimer, truthfully, is that these are my own ideas. And with all educational endeavors, the thoughts and opinions are going to change in the face of new information, time, experience, or perspective. If you talk to me a year from now, I probably will have different information or more information or different thoughts about John Sherer. So, but I thank you for the opportunity to share them with you today. Now, there really are two stories I tell when I talk about my buddy John Sherer. First is the Masonic legacy of John Sherer, the story of a Cincinnati lithographer, artist, and publisher, most known for marrying art and text, whose images last really down through to today. And the second I call my buddy Sherer, and is the story of doing the research about him and the odd path it has taken. It's kind of difficult to tell one story without the other. I'll break a cardinal rule of presentations and put a lot of the conclusions up front. This is a work in progress. I need you all to know that. The Masonic legacy of John Sherer begins in 1803 and is still something of a mystery. Truly, he was either a hardworking, tortured genius, artist struggling to survive in a world throwing obstacle after obstacle at him, or he was a two-bit hustler barely keeping ahead of his creditors. There's evidence to support both. He's either Willie Loman or he's Harold Hill. He's Death of a Salesman or he's Music Man. And there are things that you can verify and there are things that you can speculate on, and I'll make sure to note the difference between the two. Now, the story about my buddy Sherer, I want to at least talk about that a little bit. You'll find that it kind of has three recurring themes. When one question gets answered about John Sherer, two more appear. Usually the answer is right in front of me and I can't see it. And usually some meaningful connection moves things forward. Earlier, or late last year, I spoke about Sherer at Chicago Masonicon. And at the time, I really had a lot more holes in my knowledge about him. At the end of my conversation or my presentation, somebody told me, well, you know that they have these great city directories where you can see where people actually like lived during certain times. I said, no, I didn't know that. So I went to these directories and started mapping out where Sherer actually lived during his time in Cincinnati. But I still had a lot of questions because he moved around a lot. And even though he spelled his name the same way, very often many other people didn't. And so it was kind of difficult going through those documents. And it was difficult to verify a lot of information. One day, and this is one of the weirdest days ever in Masonic research, I come across a listing in the directories. It says Martha Sherer, a widow, the northeast corner of Reeder and Sedan Avenue in Riverside. They listed widows in city directories. And even though the name of Scherer's wife was never really listed the same way twice, this was the most common way that they spelled his wife's name. And that this actually coincided, this is the 1877 city guide. This I compared to an 1876 obituary and some 1870 census info I received from Don Cruz in the Ohio Lodge of Research. But again, things didn't completely match up. He's listed as 66 years old in the census, but listed as a different age in the obituary, and it just didn't make sense. The answer was there. I just couldn't see it. It was actually at the top of the page. The census starts in 1870, and they reported a person's age on their last birthday. And the numbers didn't match up because Scherer's birthday had to be between June 1st and October 1st, 1803. That was the first time anybody had ever narrowed down Scherer's birthday to that small of a time period. And as I looked, I realized he died in October of 1876. And the Grand Lodge proceedings in Ohio are usually the second week of October. So maybe the reason why his name didn't appear at any of the Grand Lodge of Ohio proceedings was maybe I was looking at the wrong year, because I only looked up until 1875 or 1876. 1877 Grand Lodge proceedings. There it is in the necrology report. This is the first verifiable proof I could actually find that Sherer was a Mason. This is the first proof I could actually find that his passing made ripples anywhere, to anyone. And I can't really tell you the relief I felt in finding this, but as with my buddy Sherer, when one question gets answered, two more pop up. I went to our grand view and noticed that there is a lodge in Massillon that goes back to that time, which is Clinton, 1947. The weird part is that while Sherer is down in Cincinnati, Clinton 47 and Massillon are in the exact opposite corner of the state. I then started sending emails, one to Darlene Shirk, who's she's a secretary of our Grand Lodge office looking for membership records. And I sent an email to their current secretary, who I'd met at one point when I was education chair for Ohio, basically just asking for information. And very shortly thereafter, I received an email from Brock Ryan letting me know that, yes, that lodge had minute books going all the way back into the charting of the lodge. And Darlene Shirk sent me this, his Masonic record. I will tell you that the time between when I first saw his wife's name as a widow in those proceedings until I had this copy of his record in my hand was 4 hours. Those of you who've done Masonic research know how that path of research never quite goes smoothly. This was the day that I started calling him my buddy Sherer, because only a true friend would mess with you as hard as John Sherer is as I try to research his life. It really is odd what I have found and can find about him. But again, that's not the story that I'm telling tonight. I want to talk about his life and his legacy. It's good to know where we start from. So because Sherer is known for his carpets and for his charts, him being born in 1803, one of the first charts that comes out is from Jeremy Cross. And the artwork from Jeremy Cross's book here is done by Amos Doolittle. And you can see that a lot of those images are fairly similar to ones we see today. Sherer would oftentimes complain that people were stealing his images, but the counter argument is that there's really only so many ways that you can actually represent the emblems on a master's carpet. The first published work we have from Sherer is actually 1837, and is this grammatical chart. It is meant to be something that is used to help immigrants learn how to speak English. It's something that I actually have a lot of love for as a former English teacher. The detail is actually really pretty amazing. It's pretty beautiful to see how they use pictures and images to help illustrate for people how English is supposed to work. The first published work I can find with him as a publisher is a map. He was known mostly as a map maker. One of his first most famous works is this embellished map of the United States, done with Doolittle and Munson. Most of the most famous publishers at the time had very similar addresses and were located in kind of one section of Cincinnati. And it is difficult to really prove why that is. Now, the speculation is that they really kind of all rented offices from each other. That somebody may be doing work with Doolittle and Munson using their presses, but putting it out under their company's name. That there are only so many printers, but they were all sort of working together, just contracting and subcontracting out. This map is interesting because this actually is found in the Smithsonian. It's found in many public records as one that was bought and adopted. What is interesting to note at this time is the way that things were sold. If you want to think of it, it's almost like those sales of like banned pizza or banned popcorn, where you might have an agent who has a stock of maps, a stock of something, and then at the end of a certain time, he either has to give the home company either back the map, back the stock, or the price itself. And as you can see here, this is an advertisement for Monk and Sherer, an enterprising young man, with initial investment, can go door to door and try to sell these maps to hope to recoup his expenses, and profit. This model, kind of selling on spec or selling, the kind of door-to-door salesman model, is one that Sherer is going to use a lot of his life, for better or for worse. Probably one of the biggest initial events in Scherer's life is going to be that Baltimore Convention in 1843. As many of us know, that was the first of many such meetings with the idea of standardizing the ritual work throughout the country. There were a number of meetings held, but the big one they talk about is 1843. Coming out of that meeting, Charles Moore does publish a book called The New Masonic Trestle Board. In there are a lot of these images. But shortly afterwards, what we see in 1844, which is a pretty big year for our buddy Sherer, is we start seeing a lot of applications for copyright, including a new atlas that he wants to put out. But then we see a request for copyrights for his first Masonic work, which are a diploma of Royal Arch Masonry and a diploma of Master Mason. This is 1844. Remember, at this point, he's 41 years old when he starts doing his first Masonic publishing. Now, the Masonic diploma is something that Sherer will come back to often in his life. It's something that he prints in various ways and in various configurations throughout his life. Once he gets a good product, he ends up reissuing it many times in many ways. But diplomas, as you know, or as many of you have seen, are a way that a Master Mason can go from place to place and be able to prove that he was in fact a Master Mason. These have been around for a very long time. But what we see from Sherer, and this is one of his later ones, is that he starts putting the emblems on the diploma along with the information. The information on this diploma is actually in English, German, and French. And to get an idea of the size of this is roughly like a book size, but it folds out to this huge poster. If any of you know Most Worshipful Brother Doug Kaler from the Grand Lodge of Ohio, those are his feet in the bottom right-hand corner of the picture. He had folded this out and posted to me. This is further detail. This is one of his 1851 diplomas. Again, he published these in both color and black and white. But we see that there are the emblems from his carpets being used on the diploma. So it can be used as a teaching tool. It can be used as a study tool as well. Before that, what we tend to see in diplomas is we see things like these. The one on the left is from the Anderson Company of 1826. The one on the right is actually from Paul Revere from 1805. Most diplomas did not have the symbols on them. They just had some information, maybe a pastoral scene, along with a brother's information. Here's one from 1823, the Maverick Company. Again, some symbols, but this is really meant more as a patient opposed to any kind of teaching tool. Where Sherer does differ is that these diplomas are beautiful and they are meant to be a teaching tool as well as the diploma itself. And like I said, this was an art form that he comes back to time and time again. These are ones from 1851, 1852, accordingly. What I think is somewhat funny is that around this time period, his work makes it over to England and ends up being endorsed by magazines there, but they get his name wrong. They give another brother credit. About a year later, in 1845, he asks for a copyright for a chart of the presidents and vice presidents. I will tell you, I have not yet found an example of that chart. I'm sure it's in a lodge somewhere. He's pretty prolific in the early 1840s, but he starts slowing down. And I was trying to figure out why he actually slowed down until I found this. This is the June 1980 or 1845 Cincinnati Miscellany magazine. It's difficult to ascertain exactly how many children that Sherer had, but from census records, we know that he had Mary in 1833, Albert in 1843, Robert in 1846, James in 1848, and Joseph born in 1850, Alexander born in 1858, and Marcia born in 1861. For those of you keeping score at home, he had his last child when he was 58 years old. 1850 is really when his life changed. This is when he started making his famous charts. This is from the Masonic Review from May of 1850. In June, he actually applied for the copyright for his carpets. And these are the ones that many of us know and have seen. The one on the left is from a lodge in Ohio. The one on the right is from a lodge in Kentucky. And the detail in the middle is actually from the Library of Congress. But these are the charts that he was most famous for. They were very large, 6 by 7 feet, and they were sold to lodges to be held on the walls and to be used as standardized tools for giving the lectures. Now, the story that Sherer told was that he traveled around all around the country, lodge to lodge, and picked the best images that he found and put them into his carpets. There's no evidence anywhere that I can find that he visited any lodges. If you read some of his writings, he does get to be a little hyperbolic at times. And as you start looking at the charts, like I said, my speculation is that there's only really so many ways you can actually show our emblems. But regardless, these are absolutely beautiful. And he starts again being prolific, putting out different charts in different combinations. The charts themselves, honestly, they sold for about $20, which is about $630 in today's money. This is his 1855 Entered Apprentice chart with George Washington right there in the middle. This is his 1856 Master Mason chart. These were remarkably popular when they first came out. It really is about the mid 1850s where things take off for him, because he meets a gentleman named Rob Morris, who many of you may have heard of. Rob Morris also, depending on who you talk to, could either be considered, a brilliant artist of Masonry or something of, a P.T. Barnum huckster. There's usually evidence to support both. It's interesting because in around 1850, Rob Morris starts talking about, he mentions in his bio, one of his articles, meeting John Sherer. And Morris says that he proposed to prepare a large and elegant chart of Masonic emblems, such as would adorn the walls, usually very attractive, that I'd seen painted, but those were expensive. In this design that I conceived in 1847, I was forestalled by Brother John Sherer, whose issue in 1850 at the Masonic carpets afterwards, much enlarged and improved, superseded the necessity of another. So Rob Morris says he had the idea first, but Sherer, did it better, and no need for him to do it. Morris also says in 1854 that he prepared an edition of Webb's Monitor under the title of The Trowel to be published by Brother John Sherer in Cincinnati. He had long complained that his invention of placing the Masonic emblems in juxtaposition with the text had been pirated by rival publishers, and the Trowel was prepared to secure him the credit he claimed, but with the want of capital hindered its production. This relationship with Rob Morris would really be a catalyst for Sherer. It's through Rob Morris that he starts getting endorsements from many different Grand Lodges. We start seeing mentions of him show up in many different publications, and his works show up in very different parts of the country. If it really is sort of that relationship that opens the doors for Scherer's work to go mainstream, for lack of a better word. There are a number of books that are mentioned quite often. Gems of Masonry, Masonic Ladder, and the Monitor, which I mentioned previously. Gems of Masonry and the Masonic Ladder, both are books that we mentioned that have the images from our Blue Lodge degrees, but also our York Rite degrees, that refer to foundational documents, that have citations to things like Henry Parmeal and the Preston Webb ritual, and many of those foundational documents, along with commentary and poetry from Brother Rob Morris. And we see a big push for a lot of Scherer's work as Brother Morris is coming up to become Grand Master of Kentucky. I'll tell you that one of the greatest books that you will find, and one of the books is Scherer's Masonic Ladder, which is published in 1867. It is probably the most developed of his work. It has the scriptural instructions and allegories for the Blue Lodge and capitular and cryptic degrees. It has the poetry and commentary by Rob Morris. Reading the books is fascinating. It's a look at early Freemasonry in America. It references the foundational documents. You can start comparing what was kept, what was changed. It's a goldmine of information and perspective. And the wonderful part is that it's available right now through the Library of Congress. You can download this for free and have your own digital copy. And like I said, it was that relationship with Morris that we start to see Scherer's work, from his books to his carpets, to his charts, to his diploma, to everything. We see it spread out across the country. We see mentions of his work everywhere from California to Texas to Canada to overseas. In this time period, a lot of it is sort of side by side with what happens at Morris. Now, something happened right around 1859, 1860. There is some sort of rift between Morris and Sherer. I have no idea what exactly it was. At this point, it's only speculation. And the only evidence I have to this rift is that in 1859, Sherer stops publishing the Freemason's Monitor by Webb, by Rob Morris, and publishes one under his own name. And it is literally page for page, image for image, word for word, the exact same. We also see that at this point, this is where Brother Morris starts his Masonic conservator movement, right around the middle of 1860, where he sought to enlist people to learn the true ritual that Morris had known, become certified in that ancient ritual, and then go out and teach it to others. There were not a whole lot of lists, verifiable lists of who those conservators were who paid to become members of this movement and be taught by Morris. But none of those lists include John Sherer. And in fact, at the same time that Brother Morris was holding his training for the Masonic conservators, our brother Sherer is entering his work into the 8th annual exhibition of the United States Agricultural Society in Cincinnati. And if you can't tell, he received 3rd place, entering in his Masonic views and emblems in this entry. And like I said, after that rift, what we start to see is we start to see more and more this model of selling on spec. He had certified agents across the country who had his work, and a secretary could write to these agents, request what it was that they wanted, whether it was books or charts or regalia, and they could settle up with the agent once the agent delivered it. It was COD. And that model works out great if you have trustworthy people, but it can also come back and bite you. And again, this is purely speculation. But if you think about that model, it doesn't always necessarily lend itself to being the most profitable. 1865 ends up being a pretty special year. He releases this book called Scherer's Masonic Degree Book. I will tell you why it's really special in a second, but this is a book that includes large color plates of all for all of the degrees. They are meant to be used again in the discussion of or the giving of the degrees. This is a very it's very colorful, it's very vibrant, and you can see that these are meant to be used. These are pretty standard symbols. One of the reasons why this book is very important to me is that this is actually how I discovered John Sherer. This book is something of a holy grail in Masonry, believe it or not. In my looking into Sherer, starting with this book, I discovered that there are actually only 4 known copies of this book in the world, actually. 2 of them were in the Library of Congress. One is in the Grand Lodge of Iowa. And there's this one in Amesville. I also found, I can wait here for a second. I found some others, including this one in a lodge in Kentucky that was sold with a stand. In Amesville, they keep it under the secretary's desk. This book didn't survive in many places. This book didn't survive intact. The ones that I have found now are missing pieces because as the book fell apart, lodges would take the plates and they would frame them and put them up on the wall, or as plates fell out, they would just kind of get rid of them. And there is one image in this book that exists in Amesville that I have not seen in any of the other currently existing books. It is called Jerusalem, Besieged by Titus. It's by John Sherer. I will tell you that what I'm about to show you, only about 200 people alive today have actually seen. It hasn't been seen in that long. But this is the image from the beginning of that book. This is a fairly typical image that people might paint at that time. But this image by Sherer is only in that book. And as far as I can tell, it currently only exists in Amesville, Ohio. I know that it's out there. I know that there are more books out there. Part of my talking to you tonight, especially those of you in Kentucky, is I bet one of you is going to go back to your lodge and look on a bookshelf and find this book or find that plate there. But for right now, I do hope you enjoy Jerusalem Besieged by Titus by John Sherer, and enjoy being part of the initial 200 people who have actually seen this in the last century or so. In 1866, Sherer starts relationships with some of the different publishing companies, most especially Carroll Publishing, and then when they get founded, Pettibone. Carroll actually starts publishing The Masonic Ladder, 9 Steps to Ancient Freemasonry. And this really is a phenomenal book to get, like I said. It is available through the Library of Congress. And it really is a book that I hope is in every single one of your bookshelves. Go download it right now virtually from the Library of Congress. Part of my holy grail for my own bookshelf is a physical copy. I've not yet found a physical copy, but I have found images of them. So again, somebody out there has that book. 1866 is also what I like to kind of call his really bad year. We learn, again, through people talking about him, that he suffered a fire in Cincinnati that suffered the loss of a large number of plates of his, including that at King Solomon's Temple, which we'll show in just a little bit. We also hear with great regret that in changing his residence in New Jersey, met with an accident that for the time threatened loss of a limb. I will tell you that I've yet to find any verification that he was in New Jersey. I can't find location. I can't find any secondary source that he was there or what happened or that he was hurt other than this mention. You can also see above that there's this posting in the paper that in transit from the Hamilton to Dayton Depot, he lost 2 trunks. And in there were Masonic jewels and Masonic books. At this point, this man is roughly 63 years old, and he's still traveling with trunks of Masonic items from place to place. What also starts happening with Sherer is that the anti-Masons get a hold of his work. Likewise, not even anti-Masons, Masons themselves start looking at his work and start saying that really it cheapens Masonry, that his work with the images and the text kind of telling all of our secrets out there, that it's making things cheap. It is devaluing our secrets. This comes from a magazine called The Freemason from 1867. You can see what they say about him. They are comparing him to Mackey, and that, they don't know where to put this except into the stove. Regardless, though, he starts publishing more and more reissuings of his previous work, but also some new work. This elevation of the Temple of Solomon, many different publishers had versions of this. Sherer put out one that was black and white. This is one that's in color. I will tell you that, at least in Southeast Ohio, there are many lodges that have copies of this that have no idea why they have it or where they got it from. It's just always kind of been there. I'll also tell you that copies of this right now sell for more than $800. So if you have a lodge that's, has this sitting above and they're looking to, do something with it, know that this is quite valuable, actually. And what we start to see is that Sherer starts publishing different versions of his work. And you can speculate as to why that is, whether it is to outpace competitors, whether it is to fill a need in the market. But he starts becoming really prolific in the late 1860s, 1868 or so, such as this new Fellowcraft chart. He starts publishing, this is his new master's carpet from around the same time. And he'll publish this both in carpet form and in page form, multiple different forms of this, so that lodges can utilize it in many different ways. In the same time period, here is an apprentice chart. And again, you can see here, it is almost in page form. It's also still being sold in large carpet form. Like we said, he had some competitors. And around the same time, in the late 1860s, we start seeing different charts being published as well, like this one from Lyman Moore. That was 1865. 1868, this is Ferdinand Mayer and Company. 1874, there's this chart published by the Scottish Rite. 1876, we see this one published by Currier and Ives, which really is probably the closest I've seen to the Doolittle chart we saw from the 1820s. 1870, towards the end of his life, he starts publishing some larger pieces like this, which is the examination of the passes of the River Jordan, just as a print. And we start seeing him branch out into other fraternal orders, probably most famously his Oddfellow charts. I have not yet been able to find charts for things like Eastern Star or any other fraternal order that you might expect from that time. It looks like he limited himself mostly to Oddfellows and the Masons. And again, we can speculate as to why that necessarily is. And here's his obituary, as we spoke about. He dies in 1876. It's interesting because later on, when they spoke about him, they said they lamented that he would come and visit lodges, and amid the paroxysms that shook his body, he was always willing to speak eloquently about the charts and his work. So he died of consumption. I will tell you that I have yet to be able to identify where he's buried, which cemetery. This place that his funeral starts from is nowhere near his house at the time. Again, with our good buddy Sherer, when one question gets answered, more get asked. What is interesting to me is, remember that I said that I found that his wife was listed as a widow in the Chicago directories, or the Cincinnati directories. What we also start seeing in 1879, a few years after his death, is we start seeing this call for charity in a number of different places. Brother John Sherer, publisher, was on the carpets. His family is unable to support themselves. They are, they're homeless. There is this call for charity from the craft. What is interesting to me is that right around that same time, both Pettibone and MC Lilly companies start publishing charts that look like this. They are virtually identical to what Sherer put out, but the copyright is by either Pettibone or Lilly. My hope is, that maybe some of the money made its way to Scherer's family, but again, that's the romantic in me. But we start seeing, especially from Lilly, these charts. It's Master Mason's chart, Fellowcraft chart, similar font, similar boundaries, similar images, in various forms, whether they are in plate form or roller form or the large carpet to hang on a wall form. They are virtually indistinguishable from classic Sherer charts. This is one actually from Trimble in a lodge in my neck of the woods. And for years, they believed that they had a Sherer until I had to tell them, I'm so sorry, you actually have an MC Lilly. And the way that I could tell was because Sherer never put trust in God on his charts. If you walk into a lodge and you see that in the upper corner, it's an MC Lilly. After his death, it really seems like Masonry just sort of moves on naturally. Other people start publishing the work. It's still available. The Masonic Review, which was a magazine that really championed him for years. This is from 1885. This is a call for new subscribers. And if you subscribe and send in $2 for any subscription, they'll send you a copy of Scherer's Masonic Ladder, which they probably had sitting on their shelves. As Masonry moves from charts to embracing new technologies, those same images come forward. And again, we can argue whether those really came from Cross or came from Sherer or came from whatever. but it's those same similar images and some of those same color schemes. These are Lily magic lantern slides, and you can see that some of the same similar images, the charts, some of the same emblems, some of the same color schemes. What also seems interesting to me that is in Masonry, even though Scherer's name has sort of died out, but the images remain. There has been something of a renaissance of his work in about the last 10 years. And I'm not exactly sure why that is. I'd love to believe that it's the embrace of that kind of way that our ancient brethren received the degrees, or that brethren found really interesting things in their lodges and want to reuse them. But we even start to see things like selling his charts. Cornerstone was a guy named Dave Bacon, who had really high quality scans and was selling high quality prints of this. McCoy currently sells Scherer's charts, even though they have his name spelled wrong, which makes me laugh. The Masonic Book Club reissued the Masonic Ladder, and every once in a while, some Grand Lodge will recommend his work and recommend his things. So even though, quite naturally, he passed on, his name has sort of passed on more into obscurity, his work exists. And the influence of his image still exists to this day. And the fact that we can still see the work, we can still see the images, still connect to him across the time is something that I truly enjoy. And that's actually all I have for now. I look forward to any thoughts, questions, comments, takeaways, suggestions. As again, this is very much still a work in progress. So thank you, brethren. I appreciate the opportunity.
Right, Worship Brother, that was an excellent presentation. What a well-spoken story of the history of John Sherer. We have 3 tracing boards at our lodge, EA Fellowcraft Master Mason, and they are the MC Lily boards, and I'm going to throw them on the screen just so you can see them. So these probably
totally MC Lily.
Yep.
Totally.
Yep.
Doesn't mean they're worthless. Doesn't mean they're awful. It just means, Lily. It's funny, my lodge in Oregon, Wisconsin, they have these. They're framed beautifully up on the wall. They still use them. And again, I had to feel really bad. I walked in, I'm like, MC Lily.
Yep. And it says MC Lily company down at the bottom.
But they're beautiful. Do you still use them? Please tell me you still use them.
We do. We have them framed in museum glass in our lodge. And we have higher quality prints on corrugated board that we use for our classes. But they are beautiful. Really are beautiful.
They are. I feel blessed that when I get to give a lecture in Amesville and I get to use that book. There's nothing like giving that lecture using this item, with a candidate. What I've also started hearing some lodges are doing, which I think is great, is they're going to the Library of Congress and finding Scherer's diplomas, and they are downloading them and they are giving them to new Master Masons as sort of something that they can carry with them as, or framing them as a gift on the night that they are raised. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful tradition to keep Sherer alive.
Were you ever able to find any images of what John looked like?
No.
No photos, no drawings, no renderings.
I have been looking. It's those holy grails, right? I want to somewhere there has to be an image, right? But truthfully, there's so little that I can verify. All the addresses he has were demolished in the 70s to make way for an interstate and a stadium. So I can't even go find where his house was. A lot of the companies he worked with, it'd be wonderful to get some of their business records, but some of those companies don't exist anymore. I really am relying on, and I'm really grateful that I've made the acquaintance of Dan Gardner from the Grand Lodge of Montana and Heather Calloway from the Indiana, the Center for Fraternal Collections. They have been phenomenal resources as I go forward. In fact, when I asked Heather about the book in Amesville, and it's really weird when the expert starts hyperventilating, because she had heard rumors about the book but never seen one. And in January, she got to come out to Amesville and see it, and she was like a kid in a candy store. It was kind of nice to see.
So looking back at one of the earlier slides, and brothers, if you guys have any questions, comments, now is the time. We have that virtual hand you can raise, or you can enter your chat, but let's start some conversation here. In the beginning of your slides, you showed his, he affiliated with Masonry in 67. Is that correct? So he was never, ever a Mason doing his work.
Well, he affiliated, but from where?
Okay.
That's what I need to get into the records of Clinton about.
So we don't know when he was officially raised, or when he became a Mason, or if he was a Mason.
We know he was a Mason because he affiliated with Clinton Lodge in
7.
What did I say? He affiliated in 1867, but we don't know from where.
Huh.
And unfortunately, around that time, that name becomes pretty, it's hard to separate who's who. There's a John Sherer that appears in many York Rite chapters and councils in Kentucky. I can't verify that it's him. I think it might be, because it's close enough to Cincinnati that he might have crossed the border. But I can't find records of him being a Kentucky Mason. I mean, it's looking for a needle in a haystack. But yeah, that's one of the big questions. Where did he come from?
On that same slide, it said passed, demitted, and then raised, expelled. What is that?
That is the list that Grand Lodge Ohio has. They have a little card on each member. They are blank because on a regular person, they would have their initiating, passing, and raising dates.
Right.
If they demitted from a lodge or if they were expelled from a lodge, those dates would be there too. The only dates that are on there are the date that he affiliated, March 25th, my birthday, 1867, and that he was reported that he died in 1877.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's it.
Looked like that was in the same line, but now I'm following.
Right. Yeah.
What attracted you to Sherer just to begin with? I mean, this is a massive rabbit hole that you've gone down.
Oh, you have no idea. It's been years.
Yeah.
This. This will sound silly, but I joined Amesville to be my fun lodge, like the lodge that I could kind of sit in the back and just throw spitballs. Paramuthia, which is my home lodge, I always feel a sense of obligation there. My best friend is a guy named Brad Maxwell. He's in Amesville, and I just kind of wanted to go there and sit in the back and do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But then they found out that I could give the lectures, and they said, "Hey, could you give a lecture?" I'm like, sure. Mm-hmm. And when I did, they sent me under the secretary's desk, and I found that book. And I'd never seen anything like that. I mean, the images are they're beautiful. The colors are so vibrant that the pictures don't do them justice. And when I asked the lodge about it, I said, "Guys, what do you know about this book?" And they knew nothing. It had always been there. Mm-hmm. And that started me kind of made the most dangerous sound in Masonry or Masonic education. I went, why? And that was it. And just starting to do more and more research. Even just going to the Google machine, I found an auction house selling that exact same book for thousands of dollars. And I'd spoken to that auction house over the course of the years, especially when I was trying to find out what the print was in the front of that book. They were a little mad because the one they were selling didn't have that print. And but that's a whole other story. But the more I started looking into him, one, the more I started seeing his work everywhere. And I started wondering, why in the world are these little lodges all around Ohio, all around Kentucky? Why is his work there?
Mhm.
Um, and starting to ask why just led to more and led to more. And then, like I said, every time you ask one question, two more pop up.
Mhm.
So, and the nice thing for me, I guess, as silly as it sounds, is it's been kind of my way into Masonry. It is fun to go into a lodge, start poking around on the bookshelves, or start looking up on the wall and be able to tell a lodge, like, do you know what you have here? How cool is this?
Yeah.
It's been my way of, connecting by opening up that book on Sherer. If I can get poetic for a second, I kind of started writing my own book of Masonry, of what Masonry means to me and how I connect to it.
Well, masonry, a big part of masonry is education with symbols. And this is, it's beautiful work, especially anyone that has an artistic, creative side to them. You can really start to appreciate and see that. Do you know if he, and if you guys have questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. Do you know if did he freehand every illustration, or was it off of a stencil or a template? Because they're so similar. Do you know his style?
I really don't know. That's one of the biggest arguments, is that where did he get his images from?
Right.
He claims that he went, to the different lodges and he found them and took, what was done in the trestle boards at the time and collected those. They're also remarkably similar to what we see in other charts. Lithography as itself, that's something that you engrave on a rock, and you use different inks to print on that. So it's I don't know, and until I could find actually some kind of primary source, it's hard to say.
What is your assumption on the rift between him and Morris? Why do you think that happened?
Okay, this is a dangerous place to talk, because I'm talking to a group in Kentucky.
We would probably agree with you. I think
Okay.
I'd say, but
Um, there is a lot of there are a lot of things written about Brother Morris, and some of them are remarkably flattering, and some really aren't.
Mhm.
And my my sense is that it probably had something to do with business and our money. If you write a monitor that has your words, your images, but has somebody else's name on it, and he's getting the money for it, that could be an issue. If there was Morris was financing a trip over to the Holy Land, and was selling some of those Sherer prints to help finance that. I don't exactly know. I just know that it almost seems like Morris, it sounds awful to say, almost sounds like Morris moved on to a different group to, try to fleece or con, or, like, if you believe that he's the P.T. Barnum, he moved on to a different circus. He started the conservative movement. There was a way that he could, you know, uh, fool some different people. And, in order to do that, you have to kind of leave other people out. I don't know whether that's true. And I have nothing to support that other than, pure speculation and speculation from others. So,
but my understanding is he wasn't the greatest person on the
if
planet.
you read all their writings, even especially Brother Morris, they both are really great talking about themselves and saying how wonderful they are and how brilliant they are, and how they do everything from cure shingles to polished leather. But again, how much that is hyperbole, how much that is the truth? It's hard to separate. That's why I rely on a lot of the periodicals from the time, because you know they're talking about them in a different manner. It allows me to kind of verify things from different perspectives.
Yeah. Well, Worship Brother Bizak, John Bizak, who is not on with us tonight, when we have our conference in September by the Rubicon Masonic Society, he will be presenting on Rob Morris.
That'll be fun to watch.
So we haven't put out any information, but that's a little teaser.
I'd love to see that. And my presentation on Sherer is ever evolving, and that's the thing that I love about this. Is usually when I talk about him, usually in the next few days, somebody texts me or emails me and says, "You mentioned this piece. We had this hanging in lodge," or I have, of all the work that that it's currently listed, that he applied for copyright, I have about 95% of it. Only about 3 pieces that I'm missing. And I'm kind of hoping that somehow, somewhere out there, those 3 pieces are out there. So,
well,
someday I'll find them.
Yeah. If you have an interest, we can put some information in the description of the video when we post it. So if somebody has some information, they can contact you directly. If you want to put that in the chat, we can add that.
I can do that shortly. So I think, yeah, I'm glad to do that. And I also, brethren, please, by the way, understand that I have very little ego about anything. By all means, because this is a work in progress, things you took away, things you liked, things you wanted more of, things you wanted less of. Any feedback you have on this presentation, I'm glad to take it. So,
brothers, I know a lot of you probably have some questions or comments, would love to hear them. Otherwise, I'll call on a few of you. I'm not afraid to do that. Worship Brother Allen, what are your thoughts tonight, sir?
I thought that you were probably going to call my name. I do have a thought, or actually I have a question. The turnaround on the materials and product that he was sending to the lodges seemed to be very quick. So I'm assuming that he had pre-made these and had them ready to go when the order came in. Did he have any type of office front, brick and mortar in Cincinnati, where he produced these things?
No, by and large, what I have been able to determine is that he used his home as his office. It was also a boarding house, by the way, but that he kept material there. What I am surmising, based mostly off of some of the other addresses that are mentioned, is that when he needed to reprint things, he would go to Lilly, Pettibone, Munson, Doolittle, one of the printers that were over in a particular area, and he would ask them to print out some things for him. So he had the plates, they had the machinery, so he would, print things out with them, have his stock, and bring it back.
Also another question, and I know you've done this, and I will say an excellent presentation of the material, and you certainly have put a lot of effort into researching Sherer. How about his family, surviving family? Have you been able to trace any of that?
It gets to be quite difficult, especially the women. Once they leave home, they get married and their names change. The men, I've not been able to track down. One of his sons, I was able to track down. He died in the early 19. I have my timeline up in front of me right now. It was 1926 is when Joseph, one of his sons, died. It's been difficult to track people down because they move, and because records aren't always the best at that time. I also don't know what necessarily I might be able to find out from his family, other than maybe somehow being able to maybe track down some, primary sources.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, Alan. Good question.
Any record of him being in the military?
No, there are a number of John Shearers that are listed as fighting during the Civil War, but you have to figure at that point he would have been in his 40s.
Mhm.
And I mean, being in Cincinnati, it's,
Sure.
At one point, he's listed as being in like a founding families type of organization, but yeah, again, it's his name gets to be pretty it just gets to be hard to identify and hard to verify that it's him. So
Sure. Well, again, excellent presentation, and I hope that once it's viewed, that anybody that would have information for you would reach out to you and see that you receive it. So certainly keep my eyes open anyway. I mean, I'm very intrigued by the story and the history behind it. So should I run across anything, I will certainly reach out to you.
there is one that is absolutely a holy grail, and I'm trying to find it here in my my timeline. It was done during the Spanish-American War, and it's a I'll find it as we speak, or I'll put it in the chat. Or honestly, I don't know, maybe I'll create something that we can put out to the brethren, especially if they would like links to where they can find many of these items, whether it's in the Hatha Trust or so much of this stuff is online right now. It's pretty easy to find. So
Yeah, we'll be happy to distribute that out.
Okay.
To our list. Sure. Does any brother have any sheer prints or anything in their lodge that they're aware of? Cheryl, go ahead.
When I saw that this talk was coming up, and I'd never heard of John Sherer, so if you Google it, you get a lot of results, different things though. Is this the person that wrote a book called Gems of Masonry, which
Yes,
was
that's
published
him.
in 1856?
Mhm.
And that is apparently full of illustrations like you're describing of. Is that like almost like kind of a catalog of all the stuff that he had gathered and the way that you've described it?
What we're seeing at that point in time is we're seeing the proliferation of monitors with images and explanations of symbols. There are a number that are published around that time. Gems of Masonry is probably one of his more famous works, and it's one of the earlier ones. Why that book is interesting is that it is him. It's published in concert with Rob Morris. It is a look at early Masonry. So think of it like a monitor, in that it talks about the ritual and why certain things are done in a ritual. It also talks about the symbols, what they mean and how they came to be used as a symbol. So Gems of Masonry is a great book. He ends up kind of repackaging it and repurposing it later in life as his Ladder of Masonry, to which he adds a number of the York degrees. So both are phenomenal books. They really are. So, and I encourage
none of those make any reference to what his home lodge was.
Nope.
That's
No.
amazing. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. None of them do. They just mentioned that he is a famous compiler of Masonic charts, or that he is the person who published these diplomas. They don't mention his. And even it's funny because Gems of Masonry says it was published by Sherer and Company. It wasn't. It was actually published by R.W.B and Company. But they published it, but then allowed him to put it out as Sherer and Company. I'm not exactly sure why. They did the work, but they let him get the credit. So,
Yeah. Well, you've certainly done a monumental bit of work yourself, brother, to track
you.
down what you have. I admire your stick-to-itiveness.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Here it is. Oh, that's not it.
Brother Kopenski.
Yes.
Was there a John Sherer who also published a travel book of Europe with
Different guy, and it's going to make things absolutely awful as you start doing research, because they're about the same time.
Mhm.
They publish, about the same time. Their names are the same. Basically, if it deals with horses or the countryside, it's probably the British one. If it deals with maps or masonry, it's our guy. But yes, that makes it doubly difficult to so.
I can imagine.
I have a maybe rather elementary question for you.
Sure.
Tracing board and trestle board are often used interchangeably. And I'm just curious to know in your research what you have discovered between the difference between those two, because I guess my understanding is they're pretty much the same thing, but they're used in different ways. So is that what you've discovered?
And what's odd is that Sherer never referred to them that way. He always referred to them as either the charts or carpets, depending on how they were presented. So, I mean, as I understand it, they are relatively interchangeable. When people talk about tracing boards, it was the idea of those symbols being drawn out, in a very temporary sense or a temporal sense, to be erased at the end of the meeting or the end of the degree. And then a trestle board, maybe something a little bit more permanent. Again, I found competing things on this, but Sherer only refer to them ever as charts or carpets.
Interesting. Brothers, are there any other questions, comments, thoughts? Quiet group tonight. All right. Well, Brother Chad, this has been a very, very enjoyable conversation. Appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge and presentation with us. So thank you. Hopefully we'll have you back again. And if you want any feedback or want any communication, if somebody finds something, just let me know what information you want to be provided online, and we'll be happy to do that.
Thank you. I'd be honored. So thank you, brother, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well. All right, brothers, we will move on and then we'll close this out. Our next education will be Brother Darren Gullah. Many of you probably recognize this gentleman. He is going to be speaking about the influence of the English Reformation on Freemasonry. Please make special note that the fourth Tuesday of the month will coincide with Memorial Day. So we're going to change that to Tuesday, May 21st, 7 p.m. So Tuesday, May 21st, 7 p.m. will be our next virtual Masonic education. So please mark your calendar on that update. Okay. If you
Brother Brian, could you spell that name or show it or something like that?
Is it not on? Darrin.
Oh, okay.
Gulla. Gullah.
I can't believe that I got that last name just by guessing, but it's because it's really quite phonetic.
Yep.
Thank you, brother.
You bet. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to take a look at the recent video called the Classic Masonic Authors Conference of 2023, where presenters spoke on McBride, Newton, Smith, and Jackson. It is free. It's on our Rubicon channel. We hope you enjoy it. Watch it. Give us your feedback. It's about a 2.5 hour long presentation, a lot of time and effort, and great knowledge, information inside of that. We hope you enjoy it. So take a look. You can always further your Masonic education at thecraftsman.org, which is owned and operated and managed by John W. Bizak. He works diligently adding more content to this website on a very regular basis, so please check that out. A lot of great papers, books, etc. there. Along with the Philalethes Society, they have tremendous information on there. Be sure to check out. If you're not a subscriber, it's cheap. Recommend it, and you'll get their publications on a quarterly basis. You'll enjoy them very much. Also available for purchase is our Transactions by the Rubicon Masonic Society, Volume 1. You can go to rubiconmasonicsociety.com/transactions and make a purchase on Amazon. A few more little updates. Masonic Table, if you haven't already watched our documentary, please do. We want to know what you think. It's available on Amazon for rent or purchase. Pretty cheap there as well. Hopefully you enjoy that too. And of course, if you're just feeling generous, you can always just send money right to Dan Kimball, and we'll take your money and put it in the Rubicon Masonic Society nonprofit bank account. But we appreciate your support in any way whatsoever. Are there any other final comments tonight? Final comments, anything anybody would like to add? All right. Well, hearing none. Worship Brother Alan Martin, will you please close us out?
Brothers, let's pray. Grand Architect of the universe, as we now prepare to close our time together this evening, we pray that you will endue us with the competency of your divine wisdom. We may be better enabled to conduct our lives as just and upright men and Masons. Guide our thoughts and actions, fortifying every moral virtue within us. Grant us the necessary strength, wisdom, and courage as we endeavor to work for your great purposes through Masonry. Amen.
So mote be.
So mote be.
Brothers, our closing video tonight, after we finish up here, will be a brief promotional video to the Classic Masonic Authors Conference. So if you can stick around another 2 minutes after that, you can watch that and see if it's something you want to look into further. Reminder, the date change is next meeting is May 21st. Mark your calendars, rubiconmasonicsociety.com/RSVP. If you're already on our list, you do not need to RSVP. So, brothers, thank you again. Have a great night. Enjoy this little promo, and we'll see you at the next education. Right Worship Brother Chad, thank you again. Excellent presentation.
In August of 2023, the Rubicon Masonic Society offered a symposium known as the Classic Masonic Authors of the 20th Century Conference. The purpose of the conference was to preserve the works of 4 of the most well-known Masonic authors of the 20th century and to bring these men and their writings back to center stage and the spotlight. 21st century Freemasons were invited to discover for the first time or reacquaint themselves with the works of Andrew Somerville McBride, Joseph Fort Newton, Dwight L. Smith, and Thomas W. Jackson. The following are presentations made about each of those men and their works. There is a bright thread that ties the work of these 4 men together. That thread is the theme of Masonic education, given at the time that it is most meaningful. That time is as a man moves through the degrees. Rather than rushing men through the degrees of Masonry, McBride, Newton, Smith, and Jackson all advocated a more measured approach, grounding men in the historic philosophy and purpose of Freemasonry as they moved through the degrees, and all sought to make Masons, not merely members. Let us rediscover their ideas now, brought to the forefront again for the benefit of Masons of the 21st century. The work of Andrew Somerville McBride is presented by Andrew Hammer. The work of Joseph Fort Newton is presented by Dan M. Kemble. The work of Dwight L. Smith is presented by Christopher L. Hodap. And the work of Thomas W. Jackson is presented by John W. Bizak. May this production help establish a connection with these great authors for the benefit of Masons of the 21st century and beyond.
Thank you, dear brothers. Have a great night. We'll see you soon.